Today I'm going to be going over the top 10 absolute best bosses in Souls history. Remember, this is just my opinion, so, please chill out. Please. And without wasting any more of your time, let's start with the number 10 entry. Midra, Lord of Frenzied Flame. The visual design of Midra is awesome. I've talked about this in a different video. The glowing head, the ragged robe, and the aesthetics of the Frenzied Flame itself really makes me love this boss fight. But what made me place it this high on the list is because of the fight itself. His moveset is super fair as he barely does any long combos and he gives you enough time to punish him, but because of this, he hits really hard. Like really hard. If you aren't at a good shadow fragment level, he will basically two-shot you. He's just a great boss, period. Godfrey's boss fight is legendary in my opinion, due to the sheer amount of aura this man has. I mean, the fight itself is really good due to his complex yet simple attack chains, and let's not forget his awesome second phase cutscene where he rips off the head of his lion just so he could get stronger. Like, that's some crazy shit right there. Another thing I like is his grappling attacks in his second phase. Now, the only negatives I have is that Godfrey, or should I say Horaloo, in his second phase might be a bit too aggressive. I mean, you barely get any chance to heal around this guy. But then again, maybe that would have made the fight too easy. But overall, in terms of fun and balance, Godfrey gets a 9 and he deserves the spot. Malenia. Man, where do I even start? This woman has caused a great shift within the Soulsborne community and the gaming community as a whole due to how difficult she is. First of all, she was the poster girl for the game, and many including myself were excited to encounter her, and after doing so, many people had different opinions on her. On one hand, you have some players praising her design, atmosphere, intriguing lore, and challenging moveset, while on the other, some people agree that while her overall visuals are cool, she is a bit overtuned, due to her ability to self-heal on every attack, whether you block them or not, her awkward hyper armor, and her infamous waterfowl dance attack. This attack alone takes Malenia from an already difficult boss fight to an almost unfair one. I've never seen an attack that gets so much views on YouTube just because people couldn't dodge it properly. It's literally up there as one of the most infamous attacks in gaming history due to how hard it is to dodge and how much damage it does. The first flurry of the attack can wipe out your entire health bar in a split second, and to be honest, I understand why people think this attack is bullshit. I mean, she literally does it out of nowhere without any build up, and when she jumps into the air, she only gives you like 1 second to run away and dodge the attack. Sure, it's been 2 years and I'm pretty sure there's been a lot of people who found ways to counter this attack with no issue, whether it's using freezing pots or just evading it in a strategic manner. But despite this, I can still say that this move alone ruins the enjoyment factor of this boss. Due to the unpredictable nature of it, most players will find themselves trying to bait out the attack so that it won't catch them off guard, and this can get pretty annoying, ruining the flow of the fight, especially in her second phase, because for some reason it's even harder to tell whether or not she's going to be doing the waterfowl dance. Now, I don't just want to focus on the negatives here, because as you can see, out of all the hundreds of bosses FromSoft has ever made, she ends up making it in the top 10. And I didn't place her here just because I thought people would be mad if I placed her any lower. No, it's literally because in recent times I've generally come to enjoy fighting her, mostly because I've learned how to dodge the waterfowl dance. But even before that, there was something special about Malenia, because deep down I could tell that she's an excellent fight, only hindered by one big flaw. And again, the reasons why I love this fight is similar to why people like it. Her visual design is cool as hell. I mean, she looks like a Valkyrie warrior. The flowing red hair, the golden prosthetics, and in her second phase, her design gets dialed all the way up. She's now naked, but instead of it coming off as, the devs being horny or whatever, it instead comes off in a way that makes sense, since she's now fully giving herself to the rot. It's almost like she's given a rebirth. Now, in her second phase, she has wings that's fused with her hair, and she has butterflies emerging from those said wings. You can tell from this transformation that she doesn't care about her appearance, as her only duty is to now defeat you. Speaking of transformation, that second phase cutscene is one of the best I've ever seen. Now, in terms of combat, despite having 2 bullshit attacks, her basic attacks are surprisingly easy to dodge and punish. Also, side note, did you know that she can actually deflect some of your attacks? All in all, Malenia is a great fight that has grown on me in the past couple months, despite me hating it at first, and if it wasn't for that specific attack, she would have been in the top 3 for sure. Genichiro Ashina. To no one's surprise, the Sekiro boss makes it this high on the list, and that's because most of Sekiro bosses are well balanced and some have fun elements to them, except for a small amount. But overall, they are pretty good, and Genichiro Ashina is one of them. His inner version is a bit more fun to fight, and that's because he has some cooler additional attacks, but the regular version still makes a good boss. The reason why I rank him higher than all other Sekiro bosses I've mentioned so far is because he requires you to use whatever skills you've learned while playing the game and use them against him, whether it's just basic deflection, Mikiri counter, lightning reversal, or just jumping over certain attacks. He manages to let the player utilize these skills in a challenging but fun manner. The only thing I can say that kinda gets annoying about fighting him is when he shoots his arrows at you, but even then it's only a slight annoyance. Overall, Genichiro's boss fight is one of the best. However, there are more bosses that I think are better than him, or at least more fun than him in my opinion, and one of these bosses happens to be from the same game. Gehrman the First Hunter. Gehrman was literally the first ever hunter of beasts to exist within the Bloodborne world. He opened up a workshop for other people to become hunters just like him. He eventually met up with Lady Maria and he trained her to become a skilled hunter. However, after a raid on a certain fishing village, Maria took her own life due to the guilt she felt, and this left Gehrman sad and depressed. He eventually chose to be in the hunter's dream due to him wanting to be with Maria again in the form of a doll. He got his wish, but he was still unhappy because he knew deep down that the doll wasn't Maria. Anyways, lore aside, let's talk about the boss fight and the presentation. When we first met Gehrman in the game, he was in a wheelchair, so a lot of people, including myself, were surprised when we saw him get up after we refused to submit our lives. Plus the lines, "Tonight, Gehrman joins the hunt," goes so hard. The visual design of the arena is also beautiful, and the weapon he's wielding looks intimidating. The fight itself is also pretty great. He's a hunter just like you, which means he's super fast and nimble and has a lot of tricks up his sleeve. Another thing I really love about this fight is the fact that everything you've learned throughout the whole game comes into play here. Overall, Gehrman makes a fantastic final boss, and I can see why some people would probably place him higher. At this spot we have the Soul of Cinder. He gets this spot because how he switches up his combat style during the entirety of the encounter. First he uses his weapon like a regular straight sword, then he changes it into a spear, then from a spear to a magic staff, to a curved sword, and then in his final phase he turns it into a great sword and wields it similarly to how the first Lord of Cinder did. This fight is just straight up amazing. Now let's talk about the visuals. The fiery charred design of the Soul of Cinder itself looks fantastic. The Ashen arena with the fire flower patches looks cool, but what I love the most is the ring of fire in the sky. It just cements the feeling that you're at the end of your journey and this guy or guys is your final roadblock. The lore behind the Soul of Cinder is also cool, as he's the amalgamation of all people who've previously linked the flame, so somewhere in there was our previous Dark Souls character, and that's why at the end he started to use Gwyn's attacks. All in all, it's a phenomenal encounter, and that's why I placed it this high. Lady Maria of the Astral Clock Tower is one of the most beloved and iconic bosses in Bloodborne. Her fight is a perfect mix of challenge, emotion, and incredible design, making her a standout boss not only in the game but in the entire Soulsborne series. She represents the best of what Bloodborne has to offer: intense combat, haunting atmosphere, and a story that leaves a lasting impression. Lady Maria's character is steeped in tragedy. As a former student of Gehrman and a hunter, Maria turned her back on the experiments conducted in the fishing hamlet. Her decision to abandon her weapon in disgust reflects her deep guilt and shame over what the Healing Church did to the villagers. Despite her rejection of the atrocities, she still carries the weight of those sins, and her role as the guardian of the Astral Clock Tower feels like her penance. This makes her battle feel personal and meaningful, as you're not just fighting an enemy, you're confronting a figure who has tried to escape her past but ultimately can't. The fight itself is a work of art, and I know I'm glazing a little, but Maria's moveset is a perfect blend of elegance and brutality. She wields her weapon with deadly precision, delivering fast, graceful attacks that forces you to stay on your toes. Her first phase is a duel, testing your ability to dodge and parry her strikes. As the fight progresses, she starts using her blood powers, transforming her already dangerous attacks into fiery, blood-soaked strikes that are as beautiful as they are deadly. The pacing of the fight is spot on, with each phase ramping up the intensity without ever feeling unfair. Gameplay-wise, Lady Maria is a fair yet demanding boss. Her attacks are fast and hit hard, but they're never cheap. The fight rewards skill, quick reflexes, and the mastery of the game's mechanics, especially the parry system. She feels like the ultimate test of what you learned throughout the whole game, and defeating her is incredibly satisfying. Mesmer the Impaler. Mesmer now has a special place in my heart as he's so good to the point where I decided not to place him in A tier but S tier over Lady Maria. I know, that's crazy coming from the #1 Lady Maria fan, but I'm a fair person at the end of the day, and I decided that it would have felt wrong if I didn't place him here at 3rd place. His boss fight is just so fun. I mean, at first his attacks and combos felt unforgiving, but even on my first playthrough he didn't feel unfair. I knew that each time I died it was my own fault, whether I got too greedy with my attacks or I wasn't timing my dodges properly. But once you know the patterns to his attacks, dodging him feels super fun, especially the second phase, which is the easier phase if you time your dodges correctly. His aesthetics and visual design is a major factor on why I placed him here as well. His lore is also super interesting too. Overall, Mesmer is a really amazing boss fight. Now at 2nd place we have Isshin the Sword Saint. Isshin is my 2nd favorite boss fight of all time, coming just behind Gael. Before I get into the fight itself, let's talk about how cool his presentation is. The arena looks fantastic and I love the fact that it's super big and open. And now let's move on to this boss fight. His encounter is amazing as just like Gehrman, he makes sure to let the player know that they have to use everything they've learned while playing through the game against him. Starting from basic stuff such as deflection and countering unparryable attacks to more advanced stuff like lightning reversal. Another thing I love about his boss fight is that it changes throughout each phase and how much he feels like a rhythmic battle. All in all, in my opinion, Isshin the Sword Saint is the best final boss in Soulsborne history. To be honest, the #1 spot was so difficult to rank because it was either between Gael or Isshin, and after fighting both of them over and over, I chose to give Gael the spot. But Isshin still comes extremely close behind him. For example, if I was to rank them out of 100, Gael would get a 99.5 while Isshin would get a 99.3 or something. And the reason why Gael ranks higher is due to a personal preference. Both of them gives off the same vibe when it comes on to being final bosses but in different ways. While Isshin is more rhythmic, forcing you to get good at deflecting and countering some attacks, he feels a bit safer if you know what I mean, while fighting Gael feels a bit less handholdy and more dangerous even on subsequent playthroughs. No, I'm not saying that Isshin is easy because he's far from that, but on subsequent playthroughs, even though he still provides a good challenge, he feels a bit safer due to the deflecting mechanic. All in all, both of them provides the same amount of enjoyment and fun but in different combat styles. Out of all the bosses in Sekiro, Isshin complements the combat style in that game the most, while Gael complements the traditional Soul style of combat, where it's more focused on dodging and timing your attacks properly. And while I really love Sekiro's combat style, due to the different build options you can try on Gael, he gets the #1 spot. Now all that aside, let's talk about his boss fight. Gael is the most Soulsborne boss if you know what I mean, and I think more upcoming Souls boss should take on this approach but innovate it even more. The fight itself is really fun and engaging, and I remember dying quite a few times to him on my recent playthrough, and none of those attempts felt miserable or unbearable. To be honest, I had a harder and more miserable time with Frida compared to Gael, and the reason being is because Gael is balanced but challenging at the same time, and he doesn't overstay his welcome either. He's super fast and agile and has a lot of chained attacks, but it's balanced in a way where they are somewhat easy to dodge. But to counteract this, he has a massive health pool, the 5th largest in the game to be exact. His health is almost the same as Midra's, which is crazy, but compared to Midra's fight, this one goes by a lot quicker. Someone on Reddit described Gael feeling different from most bosses because he felt more like a brawl compared to all the other bosses, and this is so true. When you're fighting Gael, it's just cinematic as hell. Most of the times you will both trade attacks, and seeing both the player dodging some of Gael's attacks and watching him dash around the arena makes it feel like you're watching a movie, but you're playing it. His second phase is where things gets crazy, as there are lightning strikes that can kill the player if they aren't paying attention, and now Gael has additional attacks in his moveset. First is this weird burst of numerous red skulls, and now he can throw destructor discs like Krillin. He's also much more aggressive as he has some chains of attacks that requires proper dodge timing. But what really makes the second phase a bit more challenging is the fact that his cape can damage you as well, and to be honest, I've died more times to the cape than I would like to admit. But a really underrated part of the boss fight is how big and open his arena is. I mean, it's only fair that the arena is this big, because imagine having to deal with this in a small room like Dragon Riders. And even though the arena is big, it still requires careful positioning due to the lightning strikes that can appear in random parts of it. And the scenery looks fantastic as well. As you can see, the whole world is turned to ash, which really gives off end of the world vibes. Gameplay aside, the lore behind Gael is so interesting. He went from one of Gwyn's slave knights to a friendly NPC in the main game to helping us fight against Frida to now making it to the literal end of the world, transformed into this dark soul eating being. It's really good. Plus he literally said the name of the game, like come on, that definitely gives off final boss energy. But enough glazing, as I don't want to go on and on about how great he is. But let's be honest here, there's barely any flaws in his boss fight. There's no unfair dogshit attack that's hard to dodge. He has some crazy chain attacks, but they're also not hard to dodge. And he doesn't just have a small split second of opening. He also doesn't trick the player by baiting them either. He's just a fair one-on-one duel that doesn't have any bullshit gimmick to it, and that's why I placed him at the #1 spot for the best boss in Soulsborne history.